What's going on, Soul Tribe? And welcome to Alchemist Astrology. Justin here, and are you ready to get into the Celestial News Monthly, which is a monthly show that goes over the transits of the sun and the other traditional planets, whose domiciles they're in, when they happen to station retrograde or not, when there are eclipses, all those good things. And actually, we got a retrograde and quite a few planetary changes that are going to be, so sign changes that are going to be happening this month here. Overall, June is a bit calmer. Like there's some, I say there's calmer, but there are notable things that are going to be happening, especially with Mars and Big Papa that are going to be changing into different domiciles during the towards the end of the month. There, I'm looking forward to Jupiter's one for sure. And we'll definitely talk about that here more in a bit. But before we jump into this thing here, if you want to support the work that I'm doing further, down in the description box, there are a couple ways to do that. You could either book a consultation with me, and if you have any questions, my email's down there. And also you can go to my Patreon page where I have two tiers, which one will give you access to the Lucky Day podcast, which is a monthly show that tells you the most auspicious astrological electional days for each month, and the other will give you access to a personalized monthly transit report from me. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely go check it out. I'll have my words together by then. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to give you an overview here. I'm kind of changing things up just a little bit. I'm going to start by going over the planetary calendar just to kind of get a lay of the land for the month of June. And then instead of going over things by aspect, I'm going to more so talk about it from when the different planets are doing the ingresses into different signs. I think that's just something new that I'm trying here that I'm going to kind of test out there. So just to give you a heads up. But let's go ahead and shift over to the calendar here. Here's June. Look at the moon. Now, the one thing that I don't mention on here is that I don't mention the lunations on here, the new or the full moons, because I have a separate weekly show that goes over the lunar shenanigans. So if that's something you want to check out, there's a tab down in the description box for that. But when we're looking at the month of June, we start off the month with Mercury moving into the domicile of the moon, into Cancer. We're gonna have a lot of Cancerian energy a lot of Cancerian signs in the mix here. On the second, the Sun and Saturn are completing their aspect here by sextile. On the 9th, we have the Venus-Jupiter conjunction that's going to be happening there. And that's going to be one around that period of time of this week building up. If you get a chance and you have a clear sky, check that out. I had taken some pictures last year of the Venus-Jupiter conjunction, and it is stunning. It is a really great sight. So that would be one that I would definitely try to get out there and see, because you should still be able to catch them, because it's going to be definitely later in Cancer. They're not under the beams of the sun yet. So yeah, if you can definitely catch you'll be able to see them setting. Listen, let me think about that. No, you should be able to see them setting. So yeah, that's something to check out there. And then also on the 9th, we have a Mercury Saturn square, which that one's going to be a harder aspect that we're dealing with. On the 13th, Venus moves into the sign of the sun of Leo here, bringing in some fresh Venusian flair. Then we enter into Cancer season on the 21st, so that's exciting. happy solar return to those of you with your sun in Cancer, myself included. And then we have some bigger ones that's going to be happening. But first, we got the trine of Venus and Saturn on the 25th here. On the 27th, we have Mars and Jupiter form a sextile with one another. And then on the 28th, Mars is going to move into the domicile of Mercury here of Gemini, and I'll have that stay. And then on the 29th, that's when Mercury, interestingly, like I said, the domicile lord of Mars, is going to be stationing retrograde in Cancer, and Mercury's going to have an extended stay in Cancer. So that's definitely going to be one to look out for. And at the same time, Jupiter is going to be moving into Leo on the 29th. And that's going to be a really, really kind of big one. I'm actually, and like I said, I'm looking forward to Jupiter moving into Leo there. Even though, and I'm going to go ahead and switch back over here, but that's basically the just kind of an overview of the month. But let me go ahead and get the chart pulled up here. Now, we're gonna break down each of these days kind of one at a time now, and I'm again like I'm gonna talk more so about the ingresses and the different aspects that are gonna kind of come to completion, but I'm gonna talk about it more as kind of configurations and just some kind of interesting notes that I noticed while I was getting kind of just kind of prep for this. Now, like I said, on the 1st of June here, at about 4:55 a.m. Pacific time, Mercury is going to move into Cancer. And like I said, Mercury is going to have an extended stay here. Let me pull up the thing real quick. Mercury's going to be in Cancer until August 9th. So we have a very late, yeah, till August 9th, 2026, to it'll move at about 9:28 a.m. Pacific time. So during that period of time, you want to see where what I work with whole sign houses. So if you're looking up here, you want to see what whole sign house or houses if you're working with Placidus, whatever that's looking like for you, and see what topics is that Mercury going through, especially if you have planets that are in cardinal places that are time lords. And so that's going to be if you have planets in Cancer, in Libra, in Capricorn, or in Aries, then that's going to be a more active time for you because that's either the co-presences, the squares, or the opposition, respectively. So you want to definitely keep a note of that, especially that Mercury is going to be interacting with that. Now, something I wanted to do when talking about Cancer, I'm going to do something a little different here and kind of introduce a not really a new idea. I'm not innovating anything, just bringing in a more Hellenistic view of the zodiac signs and try to get a kind of different feel for them and how the ancients viewed the different signs. And so when we're thinking about Cancer, Mercury is going to be, like I said, under the domicile ship of the moon. The moon is there to take care of Mercury while it's in there for through this extended period of time. And the tricky thing, and when you just break that down alone, because a lot of the times when you look for, let's say, like elections, you look to see not just what the planet is doing, but what its domicile lord is doing. Because you could have, let's say, a Mercury who, unless like in this chart, for example, Mercury has this overcoming superior square from Saturn, so that's not a great place for Mercury. But if we look to the moon, and let's say if the moon is here in Sagittarius in the 7th, which is not bad for the moon. The moon is not configured to the benefics, that's not great. The moon could be better, but it's not as in bad shape as Mercury is in. So this can be where you start off in a tricky situation, but then it gets alleviated somehow. When we look at the condition of the moon, that'll show you the outcome of the thing. But the kind of thing to consider with when we have planets that are going through Cancer, like how Jupiter's been through Cancer since last year, Venus is in Cancer right now, and now we got Mercury, the sun will be there soon. The moon is the fastest moving planet and we're talking in the traditional planets here that I'm talking about. And so when you're thinking about the moon, it's changing zodiac signs and entering different domiciles every couple of days. And there are going to be some conditions where the moon is doing really great, whether it's in its exaltation or whether it's in its domicile or just happen to have good configuration. Maybe it's in the house of another benefic, things like that. It's like, when the moon's like in Pisces, or like how it's been in Pisces. So there'll be times where the moon's doing great, but there's going to be other times when the moon, and even right now, the moon's is going to be co-present with Mars now when it enters into Taurus. So that even kind of dampers some things. It shows the fickleness sometimes of Cancer in that things aren't always so steady. Sometimes the moon, and they even think about the moon as signified as the mother. Sometimes the mother is there, you have her full attention, and other times mama's got to be at work. Mama's got things to do, has other things. Saturn's calling, Mars is calling, the sun is calling, dad's calling. And so it's just like, the moon's got a lot to do. And so that's going to be something where we want to pay attention to how things can maybe start feeling a bit more unsteady, especially in those kind of mercurial themes. We're thinking about themes of communication. We're thinking about themes of dealing with like the market. Mercury can deal with the like marketing, banking. I'm thinking about things as far as like, let's say even like the stocks, we can maybe see things changing there. There could be even some new, I think about Mercury in Cancer. There could be even some new sort of music that comes up, maybe some new art that happens to appear there. I think with Mercury in Cancer, I think that can be a very good. I think it can be a very good time for spirituality, to doing themes of like prayer, any sort of like oracular things, any sort of like any sort of mantic things like I Ching, or maybe doing some sort of like tarot things along those lines. Cancer being associated with the moon can be very associated with the body, and just kind of tuning into the body, taking care of the body, having that mind body connection, having those different, just paying attention to what the body can do, the different things. Mercury it can signify a multitude of talents. And so this could be even a great time for new sort of undertakings, trying different stuff, playing around, exploring, whatever that happens to look like. But when we think about Cancer, let me go back to that for a second. This is, I'm reading the description from Vedius Valen's books in anthology, and just kind of quoting from him. It says that, and it's talking about Cancer, it is in the house of the moon, feminine, solstitial, the ascendant of the universe. And it talks about the ascendant in the terms of like the thema mundi. That's like was the chart of the universe, the beginning of the universe. And Cancer was thought of as the ascendant. You usually, a lot of the times, in a modern sense, Cancer gets associated with the fourth place, but Cancer in the ancient times, I was considered with the first place, and that's the place of the body, the place of the wheel, the helm, the thing that's steering the ship, that's guiding it. This Cancer is ruled by the planet that signifies fortune, and properties, home, wanderings, travel, things along those lines. Let your mind wander, let it travel, and even like in a metaphorical sense and in a literal sense. This could be a great time for going places you've never gone. Cancer's not known for traveling a straight path. The crab moves sideways. And so this could be a time for, maybe exploring different routes and things like that. Just a little sidebar there. But it also mentions that Cancer can be slavish, and I think about it as that nurturing aspect of the moon, wanting to take care of someone. It's considered downward trending, and when I think about that, it's like either the masculine signs were thought of to be upward trending, and the feminine signs were downward trending. They're bringing things to rest, bringing things to completion. That masculine energy is giving the life, and then that resting one is bringing it to, is nurturing it, is bringing new life. So Cancer was in that, about like the other water signs or the earth signs. When we think about that downward trending, mute, watery, noble, changeable, which is not a surprise for Cancer being ruled by the moon. Public, popular, civic, prolific, and amphibious, being that of trades of like water and things. So that's where I'd even be curious about how the changes in the trades on water and on land, that you can maybe see some changes with that. And with Mercury being, again, kind of stationary retrograde, that could be something that we'll see more changes. I'll talk about that a bit more in a second. Some more things about Cancer. Men born under this sign are ambitious, popular, constantly changing, theatrical, cheerful, easily downcast, pleasure-loving, party-giving, public. And this would be one I would be, again, pay attention to just in general if you have Mercury placements, but especially if you're born with your sun in Cancer. There are a lot of things that I having my son in Cancer. There are things that I do see. The angels are they'll put you on blast, especially on this last part here. I think that this is very interesting. It talks about Cancer being unsteady of mind. They say one thing but think another, and not sticking to one activity, or at most two. They become wanderers and travelers. And so a lot of things, different things than the typical cancer's emotional, cancer's nurturing, cancer's that. I like the idea of thinking about that, the more kind of popular side of cancer, the theatrical side of cancer. I just saw The Devils Wear Prada not too long ago. Meryl Streep, her son's in cancer. A lot of water in that movie. But there is a, I think, very, again, adaptable side with cancer. I think because that cancer can read body language very well. I think it's more than just the feelings of things. With the moon, you think about the moon being about the body, the appearances. Cancer observes and can see that and can see those sort of changes in things. So it's an interesting time, I think, that Mercury is going to be in Cancer. The one thing that's really tough about this transit that Mercury's in, because even though it's co-present here for a period of time with Venus and with Jupiter, it's not going to complete those aspects. It's not going to catch up, and they're just going to have that co-presence for that period of time. But it is going to complete that tetragonal or square configuration with Saturn, like a little bit later in the month. That'll complete around the 9th of June, like I had mentioned. But thinking about that, and actually that's one that I wanted to read as well. This is another excerpt from Valence here, talking about the square of of Mercury and Saturn. And it says especially with with Saturn being in the superior position here, and that just means when the planet is on the right of the other planet, that was thought of, the one in that position is thought to dominate the other planets. And you can see why I'm so excited for Jupiter to get from under that pressure of Saturn with that, having that, because Jupiter's again been under that every time that Saturn's been in Aries. When it was there for that bit, when it retrograded back out, it got some ease, and then it was there to stay. But Mercury and Saturn, now we're talking, this is Vedius, quoting Vedius here, square with each other make everything dull. They make men sluggish, quarrelsome, and self-willed, slow in action, and feeding off calumny. Now, there was some, I love Vedius's vocabulary, so I was looking up some things with that. And calumny, if you're not familiar with that, which I wasn't at the time, is that idea of of gossip, of feeding off, of spreading a false rumors. And that's very much a Saturnian thing. And that would be something that I would pay attention to while Mercury is under this pressure of Saturn, like I said, until August. This is why I'm kind of talking about them more in the terms of signs as opposed to completing aspects, because just because they complete on the 9th, that doesn't mean that whole thing is done, that Saturn's done doing hard things with Mercury, and it's all great. The aspects last as long as they're all sign based, as long as they're configured to one another, that aspect's on. Now, again, the applying and the separation is a nuance that comes into that, of course. But this is some things we want to be careful about getting caught up in I'd say in just an idle gossip of defaming. That's a very Saturnian thing. Any sort of just like secret harboring, any sort of and that's something that I would pay attention to, even just like misinformation, being triple checking your resources, seeing where you're hearing your news, where you're hearing your things. You have various things to confirm that. I think discernment can be tricky here, especially when it's very, I think it's going to be similar to like when Mercury is, and I think there's even a bit of more of a steadiness when Mercury's in Pisces, considering Jupiter doesn't move like the moon does. But it's going to be, I think, similar to that, where there can be that potential for confusion, and there can be this potential for manipulation. You remember that Cancer was talking about it being watery, and there's this muteness, I think, that not being able to, feeling like Saturn is not being able to say something because of maybe coercion, because Saturn knows something. Saturn's got a secret, and it's lording it over you. So that could be something that we can maybe even see on a mundane sense, some sort of like secrets coming up along those lines. That could be, something like that. I could see that being a theme that's coming up. Oh, and that's not all that comes up with that. That's just in the calumny thing. So that would be something. No, talk me on people's backs. Treachery. That's another thing that's mentioned in the Saturn Mercury squares. And that idea of treachery, that idea that I I pledged my allegiance to you and then you betrayed that. That could be something that can come up. That idea of where there's allegiances, alliances that are severed or something along those lines, where like we said with when we're talking with Cancer, saying one thing and then thinking another thing. That's a very Saturnian way of utilizing a mercurial sense. Now, I like with the at least while the benefics are there, that's at least is mitigated some, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is something along those lines. But I think that there is a chance, an opportunity, again, at least while the benefics are there, to choose to let the good angel win. I think in that. But yeah, that could be something where we could see some things like that potentially come up there. So that's another one that I would tune into on a personal level, on a broader level. Trickery is mentioned in this configuration, and violence is something. And it talks about they also become practically mute or hard of hearing. And I was thinking about that more so in like a metaphorical sense, where someone is being suppressed by something. There's something that's not being heard, that's not being. It's like the crab is it's like I just picture just like the crab boiling and not being able to exclaim that or to be able to express that. So, that may be something we're trying to find, and it's strange that that's happening when that's a forming exact with Jupiter and Venus forming that conjunction as well. So that's what I'm kind of thinking about it in that broad sense. There's some good things that I can think can happen with this too, that maybe under certain circumstances that we find some beauty in that, where we can take the melancholy of Saturn. Sometimes it's in those times of depression, maybe of anxieties and things, that we can create more art. Some sort of like we could see maybe some sort of rising forces come out of this. Some kind of yeah, I think about Mercury doing mercurial things through the sign of the moon, is that expression using the body, the abilities that the body has, the things that it can do. So there could be some really nice things too as well with this. But again, it's going to depend. Big thing, and this would be one where I say, now while Mercury's in. I mean, you could always watch lunar shenanigans, but I think that this would be a good one to tune into, that just to get an idea of where the moon's at, so you can see how it's doing, and then you can kind of correlate that with the mercurial thing. So, quite a bit to talk about on that one there, but I had a lot that I wanted to get on that one. So yeah, that's basically all I wanted to. I think that's all I want to talk about in the meantime before we get to the retrograde. So I'll have more mercurial things to to gab on about. But let's go ahead and get into our next increase. I'm going to fast forward to the 13th of June, because at about 3:46 a.m. Pacific time, that's when Venus is going to enter into Leo, into the domicile of the Sun. Now, let's do the kind of same thing like we did with Cancer. I wanted to kind of talk about Leo here. And you'll see some of the same, like kind of similar things that you would expect with Leo, but there are some other things that I think are really important that I think are that you could see with Leo. So Leo is masculine. This is Vedius, again from Vedius's text. Leo is masculine, the house of the sun, free, fiery, temperate, intellectual, kingly, stable, noble, upward trending, changeable, solid, governing, civic, imperious, irascible. Now, I do think that this is one with all of these kind of it mentions that there's a lot of changeability that's being mentioned there. We had that with Cancer, now that's being mentioned with Leo. Notice how that changes when we're talking about the Venusian things in our charts. And this would be one to see where you have Leo in your chart. What house or houses, or excuse me, what places is that in? What topics does that cover? Is Venus forming a configuration with one of your time lords? That's a good way of looking at this, because this is a good time, where when we're talking about the benefics, especially if you have, this would be one to check, especially if you have excuse me, more fixed, or more of the fixed placements. That's going to be Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Taurus. This is good. Venus is going to be working more actively with it because again, those are the squares, co-presence, and opposition points of those times. But when we think about there's that changeability, so noticing that change, how relationships may be changing, because Leo is one, and this is someone I was actually talking with another person who has their sun and Mercury and Venus in Leo. We were exchanging notes about fire, the fire element, and Leo I don't think is one that's like I think any of the fire signs, when pushed, when challenged, yeah. Oh, okay, then let's go ahead and go there then. But I think the difference with Leo compared to, let's say, like Sagittarius or Aries is that once Leo's up there, it's hard to bring that back down. It's one that can it's one of the solid signs, so it's one that can sustain. It can hold that heat, and so that can lead to, that'd be one where again I'd be mindful about any sort of miscommunications, things that coming up, just more fire that's coming into the relationship. But that is I think also, I wouldn't say this is a time to maybe temper that fire, but it can be a great time, I think, of honing that fire, honing that heat into something creative with Venus, using that to produce something wonderful. When you think about Venus doing things in the domicile of the sun, it's doing stuff so that it can stand out, so that people can. It wants to be recognized. It wants that to share these things. Let me talk some more things about this the Leo. Men born under the sign are distinguished, noble, steady, just, haters of evil, independent, haters of flattery, beneficent, inflated with their lofty thoughts. And I like that last one, that inflated with their lofty thoughts. I think this is a time to think big, to think in a way that can, and it could be whether if you want to expand your friend group, if you want to be more artistic, to want to create more, if you want to be more in tune with one's sense of spirit, you may be doing more, it may be more prayer, more kind of meditation, getting into those sort of steady. The solid signs are a great time for doing things that are long lasting, doing things that can become a regular routine. Venus is that idea of cleanliness, of purity, of like baptism. There's a devotion, I think, of with Venus that Venus doesn't get a lot of. Venus is that, I think, that stirring, that desire, that thing that whips you into a frenzy when you just like when you just are feeling prolific, when you're just doing the thing, whether you're just feeling really funny or you're just when you're just really on like that. That's what I imagine, that kind of Venus being able to do those things in Leo. So exploring that sides of oneself, seeing where that's kind of coming through there. One last thing, let's see, do I want to, no, there's nothing else I want to mention about Leo, but one thing that I did want to mention that Venus is going to do while it's in a sign of Leo, the there's something really fascinating about the relationship. It's going to form, the only aspect that Venus really is going to complete while it's in Leo is that trine with Saturn. And the trine with Saturn, how Vedas described that is very fascinating. Let me see if I can find that. Should have had this more prepared. Ah, here it is. So this is an interesting one, and I'd be curious to see how this, maybe even will show up in a more mundane sense. This could be, I would see, this would be a great, I could see maybe some sort of like new art coming up, some sort of, maybe even something with Venus was maybe new businesses even coming in, to say there could be a new appreciation for beauty. There could be more loud, more maybe bolder colors, more bold sort of, maybe different sort of music, some sort of, I picture just like parties and things, like some sort of like grand grand festivals or something along those lines. That would be, I think, a really great way. Or you maybe there could be something along those lines that come up with that Venus and Leo. Just a little random thing, but the trine, you would think, even though the trine is considered a beneficial aspect, that so you think with Venus and Saturn that it would be a real positive delineation for this. But I wanted to read this one because I wanted to show the kind of how the ancient thinkers thought compared to how would think about that now. So it says, Veda says, Venus trine with Saturn makes men severe, humorless, supercilious, rough in love, and promiscuous, yet lying with base-born or elderly women or with prostitutes. These men lie with the wives of their brothers or patrons, with those of their fathers or with their stepmothers. Their wives sneak off and lie with their husbands, slaves, or friends. It, of course, is necessary to know that predictions can change according to the sign and configuration and all these other things, but it also indicates those who are unaffected by love or who only take enjoyment by themselves. And so there's almost that there. It makes me think about different aspects of Saturn and of Venus. And forgive me for the ancients were kind of savages like that when they did their delineations, but there almost gives me this sense of an enjoyment of being with oneself or being by oneself. Saturn was thought of as Saturn doesn't like any of the other planets. When you think about like how Jupiter loves all planets, it can get along with everyone. Saturn doesn't like anyone. It wants to be by itself. It wants to do things on its own. And this could be maybe a period of time where you could find where you can benefit doing some things by yourself. Maybe it can be more of a serious time to work on. I think about Venus dealing with like spendings and markets and things like that. This could be more of a time to save up for some things, to be a bit more frugal with one's savings and things like that, having better management as far as like your finances. So, but I think I think this is a time where people should be more. I'd like that. That was another word, supercilious, to look up. That being bold in the presentation of oneself. Like, this is not, I think, a time to just stay cooped up and stay solitary. This is a time to do some kind of work, do some sort of like do something that the people are going to maybe potentially benefit from. The humorlessness, the seriousness just gives me that time where you had to kind of crack down to kind of be focused to, yes, I want to hang out and do all these things, but I also got a legacy to leave behind. I also have some other things that I want to work on, that's ultimately going to benefit, the rest of us there. So, yeah, I think that there could be some. This could be, I think, again, it doesn't have to. June is a lighter month, but I think it could be a very impactful month. I think there can be some good things that can be produced in this period of time, a time of kind of sitting down and kind of like, just doing one's ambitions, or maybe making more time as it makes sense for one's ambitions. This could be even, I think about that idea of time, and there could be some of the ease too. It may be more serious, but Saturn's giving one more time. Maybe all of your friends happen to be busy with stuff, or maybe your family happens to be busy with things. So now you have time to just kind of do your own thing, to kind of get some stuff there. So that can be, again, Leo, and think about that sun can be a very independent energy, or independent significator, but it can benefit the masses at the end of the day. So, just some things I think to think about with. I think that's all that I have to say about that with Venus and Leo. I think the hardest thing that's going to be with Venus and Leo is going to be this next one that we're going to talk about here, which, let me get that pulled up, which is going to be the sun entering into Cancer. And that's going to happen on June 21st, 2026 at about 1:24 a.m. Pacific time. And for my Cancer sons out there, happy birthday season. And if it's your birthday season, hit me up. Send me an email, because then you get a 5% discount off of a reading with me. So definitely something that you want to look into. See what's coming up for you for the year. But yes, it's Cancer season. I got a lot of people to say happy birthday to. But this would be the one that I would say maybe, and just to kind of touch back on Venus for a minute. This is going to be maybe the harder time for kind of those Venusian significators when we're thinking about relationships, love, marriages, and things, because this is when Venus is going to be, or where the sun is averse to Venus. So the sun can't see Venus anymore when it's in Cancer. They're right next to each other if you're looking at the chart here. But because the idea in the ancient times, there wasn't like the semi-sextile or the inconjunct. If the planets didn't see each other, they were just averse to one another, and those were considered even worse aspects than the opposition were thought to be. Because at least with the opposition there, I may not like you, I may see opposite ends of you, but at least we're still seeing each other. Oops. But the being aversion is that I don't see you at all. It's just I can't the sun, and that's just on a negative sense. But even if you think about it in a more innocuous sense, the sun can't see Venus. It's like if Venus had a problem, let's say needed a hand for the sun, for let's imagine the sun is, well, I mean, it is not too hard to imagine, the sun is your landlord, you have a leak or something like that, and you need to get in touch with them, but you can't find them. They're nowhere to be found. Maybe they're at the moon's house. They're hanging out with the moon. Big Papa and Mercury's there. Mercury's about to go retrograde. Want to see what that's about. The sun's all distracted. So sometimes that can make it hard for those Venusian factors to come through, or it could be where Venus is not able to get the support that Venus needs to do the things that Venus does best. So that could even be something where you take that time that we had to do all of those things, to be solitary, to have those stuff, because it may be a little bit harder. And that can not just be just because something bad happens. It could just be because life happens again. You're in the middle of your great work, your magnum opus, and then your kid gets back from hanging out with like the grandparents or staying on a trip, or you got to get them back to school, or you have to go, maybe you had just a little bit of time off of work, or maybe whatever the situation had to be. Now life is happening again, and it's kind of throwing you off and taking you away from that, and kind of getting you removed from that. And that's kind of how you could think about that when I think about the aversion, or planets being averse to one another, how that could potentially look like there. So that's something to think about. But otherwise, all the things that I said about Mercury pretty much apply to the sun. Now, the hardest thing that the sun is going to have is going to have that square with Saturn, like similar to Mercury. And I want to pull that up here, because this was an interesting one. It's actually very short when it talks about this, but it was a pretty succinct one. But I thought it was very interesting. This again, Vedius here. Saturn squared with the sun and on the left harms the ancestral property while the native's father is still alive, especially when Saturn is in feminine signs or in opposing degrees. Now, when I think about that, and that's just Saturn being on the left. Saturn's on the right of the sun. And so one thing that kind of was a little bit of a bummer, that I kind of thought about this, if we're thinking about the more harder things, because again, the sun's not going to apply to Jupiter while it's in Cancer. It's just going to be co-present with this for this little period of time, for this next week that we have Jupiter in Cancer. So one thing that I thought was kind of a bummer, when I think about the significator of the sun being that representing like the king, and Saturn being the land, and even the delineation talking about the ancestral property, the things that we've inherited from, and I say we as humanity, that we've inherited from our ancestor. What ways could that be squandered? What ways could we see the changes that potentially happen there, maybe due to some sort of theatrical things? Because when you think about Aries, that idea of that sort of domineering force, that idea of go, that just does things, that takes that, and then Saturn, just the taker away of things, and sort of like, what are some ways that maybe those, I mean, and when we're talking about, again, the sun, that's the king, those in power, what does that look like? How does that change in the lands? What is that? What are some things that while the sun is in Cancer, what are those? Because again, Saturn's in Aries and for the next couple years. And so anytime that there's this stuff that is going through Cancer, this is going to be a hard time. It's going to be a bit different when all those planets are in Capricorn, but while we're dealing with this stuff in Cancer, this is one of the more kind of harder things to kind of deal with too, that's going to be kind of leading into next month, because the sun is going to be in Cancer until the 22nd of July. And so it's going to be under this square and that, so this is a way to think about it too, is going to be under that square of Saturn until July. And if I didn't mention, I should have mentioned that back with Venus. Venus is going to be Venus is going to be in Leo from June 13th until July 9th. That's when Venus will move into Virgo. So I just wanted to mention that there too, just so you have an idea of how long these configurations last, and how long that these windows are open until. So Cancer season does seem has a bit of a tough tone to it. And again, it's going to depend on the moon, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are a lot of changes. I could see this as a capriciousness that's happening. It could seem like maybe we're just it could be almost like being thrown by the winds of just, again, sort of like a whimsical nature, just sort of a nonchalant sort of nature. But I wouldn't try not to let that be disheartening, because I think that's one of the main significators of Saturn, that idea that'll keep you depressed, that'll keep you careworn, that'll keep you in that state of feeling trapped and isolated and imprisoned, and not being able to feel like one is able to express one's life, like one's light is being either snuffed out or being restricted in some sort of way. This is one where I think it's like we all have our part to do in this, and whatever that looks like for you. I don't think that we all have our significators in our chart, what things we're here to focus on. We're here where things meant to try to improve and things along those lines. So yeah, I think that this is one where the sun can significate friendships too. And I think that should call on those friendships and have those conversations with those people. And I think that's going to be, communication is a big thing that should happen during this period of time, so that we can be guiding lights for each other during the changeable times. Because I think that makes things a lot more manageable. It makes Saturn less heavy. It's one thing when we're all carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders, and that might feel hard. When I was thinking about with Venus, talking about how that can sense, like, that I gave that idea of like it's a more serious time, but it doesn't have to. Where there are seriousness, we can. It's easier, I think, to deal with these things when we kind of band together in this. So that's something that I'm always going to be a big fan of, and I think that the more that we talk with each other and connect with each other, and remember that we're all going through this experience together, it makes these things more manageable. So that's just something I think to think about with Cancer season, just with the sun moving through there. But let's go ahead and go to the next ingress here, because we're going to talk about Mars. Let's talk about the malefic, because Mars is going to move into Gemini at the domicile of Mercury at about 12:29 p.m. Pacific time. Now, when you think about Gemini, let's look at the house of Gemini here. I like this one about Gemini. There's some things about Gemini that in Virgo too that I don't think is talked about, but I'll talk about Virgo next month. But so when they talk about, when this is Valence here talking about Gemini, Gemini is male, bicorporeal, that means like the mutable signs, articulate, the house of Mercury, upward, trending, celestial, feminizing, a freed man, sterile, and public. Under it are born scholars, those working in education and letters, poets, music lovers, declaimers, or those like declaimers, like those who speak like rhetorically, stewards, those who receive trust, also translators, merchants, judges of good and evil, sensible people, practitioners of curious arts. I love that one. And the seekers of mystic lore, so like occultists and things like that. In general, whatever the house will usually produce, and then he'd talk about some other things about as far as like configurations and stuff like that. But when you think about Mars, that idea of Mars, that on a base sense, Mars is that rule of like action and effort. And yes, it's one of the malefics. You know, like I think that is something to keep in mind. But it's the Mars is more so putting that force in the intellect, in the mind, in the communication. You know, when you was talking about the all the different things of different themes of Gemini, I would pay attention to one, how with let's say if there's like new rises in like music and things like that, how that can make one move, how that can affect one's action, how art can stir one things up, how rhetoric can stir one things up, when someone's speech emboldens you, galvanizes you in a sense. Because you know, Mercury, the thing with Mars in this, and Mercury's getting ready to, it stinks that Mars is entering at this time, because Mercury is not going to be in the best shape, because Mercury is going to be stationing retrograde tomorrow. And Mercury can't see Mars. And so this is one where I would pay attention to, again, to strong communications, be mindful of one's words, because under those pressures sometimes, like I was talking about with the sun and things like that, there can be these sort of like snappy responses. This can be a very spontaneous sort of just like doing things. Mars is that idea of things of like that are really abrupt, that are really fast, that can just kind of change on a dime. So that would be one where, yeah, I would tune into, as far as like how we're driving. You know, Mars deals with that idea of wanderings. So that'd be something to pay attention to. Quarrels among friends, separation among friends, theft is another thing I could see. I pay attention to any sort of like communication scams, any sort of like internet scams, any sort of, you know, AI is getting smarter. My friend was just telling me about some weird AI thing where it can mimic people's voices and whatnot. So again, just using discernment, not to a point where I think, because I think Mars in that Saturn mix can keep one kind of paranoid. So and with Mercury not being able to see what Mars is doing, not to be able to, there could be, Mars and Saturn are both that idea of trickery and lies. Saturn's a little more devious with it than I think with Mars. Mars is more so just like outright lying, just like the breaking of like I was saying, with kind of similar with that treachery, where it's like it'll say, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this thing, and then we'll flat out do something the complete opposite, or just straight up lie to you. So that would be one. Again, I pay attention to discernment during this time, because Mercury can't really see what Mars is doing, what trouble it's stirring up in its house. So, you know, this is one where could even see where maybe there's something with some sort of lawsuits that happen to come up, or there's some kind of confusion there, some sort of weird, you know, again, robberies are things that I could see kind of coming up there, people trying to pull a fast one. So yeah, those would be just some general things that I would kind of tune into with this Mars entering into Gemini. This would be one to look to see where you have Gemini in your chart, what house or houses that rules, or houses associated with that. What are the squares? And I mean, you already know the squares opposition. Do you have any planets in the squares, oppositions, or co-presence with Mars? Like for myself, I have, as far as like co-presences go, my Mars will be right on my moon placement on this day. Oh, this is one of my friends' birthdays, so I gotta tell him about it. So Yeah, that's gonna be one I'm looking out for. Mars. But yeah, that's so you see where if you have planets, especially in like Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces, it's Mars is going to be more working more active with your chart. So this could I could even see some sort of like things in military things, some sort of like advances on that front, maybe some sort of again some sort of like confusions. They're not being able to know the full idea of what's happening there. So that's a bit of a trickier one. I think that Mars in I think just things are moving a lot fast. I think the mind is moving very fast. So and again, it's like this is what I imagine scrolling must be like. There's sometimes where I'll look at some things and it's just like you start the scroll and it's just like all right, that's enough of that. And that would be one I'd even again pay attention to the sort of things that you're taking in along those lines, especially with that retrograde. That just and how that affects the body, how that affects you and how that sits in you. So I think that sort of body awareness I think is going to be a kind of a big one there. Now let's get into we had again all these lunation or excuse me all these ingresses here. Now we have on the 29th at about at about 10:35 a.m. Pacific time, Mercury is going to station retrograde. Now, the stations are thought of as these really kind of pivotal points. This is when it looks like the planet sky has completely stopped visually from our standpoint. It looks like it's just Mercury's come to a halt. And the idea of the retrograde, there are a lot of things that you'll hear with the retrogrades, and that was one I always thought was a weird kind of fuzzy one when you talked about a retrograde. But in the ancient times, a retrograde was thought of this idea of kind of a basic way of subtraction. It's taking back its portions. It's going back over the portions that it's coming from. Mercury is going to be retrograde from the 29th of June until the 23rd of July. That's when it'll station. That'll be another one of those station points there. But usually, especially within those couple of days of that station, I think it's like you want to pay attention to especially if you have this in your chart, if you were born within a week before or after a direct or station of a certain planet, because we thought when the planet was stopping, then that all of the planet again isn't adding anything. It's starting to subtract. So some of those mercurial themes are sort of being taken away. So you could see where there's that maybe that idea of where I could trust your word. Now I can't. You take that back with that retrograde. Now you were going back on what you said. Like, wait a minute, what happened here? You promised me one thing, and now you're saying a whole other thing. That could be where you could see some sort of miscommunications there. Maybe some things with like documents that get messed up. Maybe some things with like some sort of legal matters. Maybe some sort of paperwork. This would want to be keep up with your any sort of important documents. Keep up with any sort of backup files if you're working on anything of long term, making sure to just that you save all of your stuff. Just have all your ducks in a row. Keep your maybe not holding on to just specific files for whatever any sort of receipts. That would be a thing, especially if you're making any sort of like large purchases or anything along those lines. That would be one that I would pay attention to. The moon is even just kind of looking at this station, looking at the ruler of Mercury. The moon is opposing this station here. So the moon's like F. What do you mean you're going to be here for another? Because, Mercury only stays a couple of weeks in a sign at a time. Mercury moves really fast. When I'm recording this, Mercury is just like starting to zip through. And it's so weird when it goes from moving so slow and then it's just like gone. It is gone before you know it, and then it'll slow, and then it pumps the brakes again. And so the moon's just like, well, okay, what do you need? What do you need during this time? And Mercury's very needy. This could see another one where you could see maybe some changes in the markets, maybe some changes in travel, where there are certain routes that are changed for certain reasons, maybe different changes in like the city, maybe you have to do something with your homes, maybe like a printer craps out, maybe something with like a fridge, a home appliance. And I'm just, this is just randomly check your vehicles. Just you just and then if you have anything, any sort of travels during this period of time, allow yourself just more time for that. Just because it's not that, I think something with the retrogrades too. Mercury's not a time lord for everybody. It affects there. You have some people who get wrecked by retrograde. And so that's when, if you do have Mercury as a time lord, tune into that. You do tune into that, see how and see what area that may, well, of your life that may affect if Mercury is a time lord for something. But there are other times where Mercury doesn't do much for you, and that, I think that's important to have that distinction, to know when this is other people's stuff and then when this is my stuff. This is not that the world is out to get me. No, some people are just going through some tough times, and you know what, that must suck. And that's something where, if you notice those miscommunications, those kind of Mars and Gemini themes kind of coming out there, that would be, yeah, that would be one to just kind of tune into that and understand that it's not that this is just going to affect certain people more than others. And so, and it just to just kind of honor that. And then I think that it can be, we'll get through this as best as we can with this, with this retrograde. Trying to see what else. And the only, again, the thing that does stink about it is just that it just has this Saturn, that pressure for Saturn the whole time. It's not like that Mercury's having the best stay. There's sometimes that the moon, that has like days like this where the moon's just pissed off that Mercury's there. Like, what do you mean you got to extend your stay? And then when the moon gets in Pisces, just like, all right, I see you've been going through a lot. Let me help you out. Just like the moon just so changes so much. So yeah, this is one I think we try to navigate with as much grace as one can. I think the more awareness that you have for again that period of time, the better, for how long that lasts. And again, that was just to say those dates again, from the 29th until the 23rd of into the 23rd of July is when Mercury is going to be retrograde, and then Mercury will officially move out of Cancer on August 9th, and then Mercury will be done doing all of that in our Cancer, in the Cancer portions of our chart. And won't we feel happy about that? So that's Mercury there. And then let's talk about the last pretty big one here. So we have Big Papa. Big Papa is going to, and this is on the same day here, the 29th, Big Papa is going to enter into the sign of the sun. And this is going to happen at about 10:52 p.m. Pacific time. Now, I know that this, again, Jupiter in Leo was, I think, Jupiter in Cancer was a much anticipated thing. I think it was one that I think a lot of us were wanting it to be, that deliverance from evil that Jupiter promises. Because this is Jupiter at its best, or not at its best, but this is Jupiter outside of its domicile, where it's celebrated, where it's an honored guest in the house of the moon. So it's like, it didn't have a completely bad time. When the moon was able to cater to Jupiter, the moon did that. The moon, could do, and then Jupiter was able to give as much as it could back. But it had this periods of time where sometimes Saturn was real pissed to see it, and then other times it was like, okay, a little less, and then now back to more. And so it was this sort of on and off. And again, there's a consistency with the moon, but there's a consistency in its inconsistency. It's waning, it's waxing, it's all of the things. And so now that Jupiter's going to be in Leo from the 29th of July until the 25th of, let me see if it, nope, okay, it doesn't move back into Leo. So it's going to be in Leo until the 25th of July, 2027. And that's when it'll officially enter into the Virgo portions of our chart. So again, when we're looking at the ley land, similar to the themes of Venus, we're thinking about how Jupiter can do all of those themes in the house of the sun. And so, and this is a pretty nice place for Jupiter too, because one, Jupiter gets some steadiness for this year. It doesn't have to deal with that inconsistency of the moon every few days. It's changing sign. The sun changes signs every 30 days or so. It's a very steady rhythm. There are going to be some times where right now this is a Jupiter is averse to the sun. Let's talk about that in the outset. It's very similar to Venus, where Jupiter is just walked in. It's not like Jupiter enters into Leo and then all is solved. It's Jupiter has to take its coat off. It's been in Cancer. It's got a new feel to get into. How can it work with those themes of a place that's familiar to its sect mate? I think that's a cool thing to think about too. This is Jupiter has triplicity here. It's one of the triplicity lords. It has its bounds here. Jupiter's actually when it first enters into Leo. It's in its bounds, so it has it in its own confines, so that Jupiter's kind of free to just kind of do its own thing for a little bit. The sun's not able to see that yet. It'll kind of see that more towards the end of the month once it moves into Leo. But right now, this is one, I think, just a bit of a breather from Jupiter, because it has been under a lot of pressure from Saturn. And I wanted to show the difference that a Saturn Jupiter trine can be compared to a Saturn Jupiter square. Now, let me pull that up really quick. Here, I thought doing this method would probably be faster, but I ended up having to have more to say. Now, and I really like this, and I think this is something to keep in mind. Saturn trine with, this is Valence, Saturn trine with Jupiter indicates a favorable configuration. These stars make men landowners, masters of grain land and vineyards, grain farmers, constructors of buildings, villages, and towns, but they are austere and supercilious. There's that supercilious. They're haughty about it. They're bold about it. They're serious, and they're proud about it. If the configuration, and this is talking about if the configuration is more exalted, it has some things about that, some other things. But compared to what Jupiter was just in, I just want to just kind of show what Jupiter has been in over the last year. When Jupiter was square with Saturn, it dulls the good influence of Jupiter, especially if Saturn is on the right and rising. The men succeed with great difficulty. They are subject to penalties. They make gains only with toil and pain. They suffer loss in their children. And so you see, that's what Jupiter has been under, but now Jupiter is able to attain land again. It's able to tap into its abundance. It has to be serious now, because now this is one of those, again, another kind of pocket where Jupiter is going to have, it's not just under that heaviness of Saturn anymore like Venus was. Now Jupiter has this year to just kind of do its thing. And granted, it's not necessarily a place where Jupiter is in particularly. It has dignities in Leo, and that's something I think that is not just mentioned enough, that there is good stuff in Leo. I think that this Leo stuff can be very positive for Jupiter to be in here. A time for us to kind of shine, for those maybe who want to end the injustices in life. I think that this can be a year for that, for those who want to rise. Jupiter brings those with rank. It's the ruler of rank and crowns and zeal. Those who want something different for their lives, something where it's just not just pressured down by malefics, but something that's life-giving. Jupiter's childbearing, engendering. Jupiter has desires. Jupiter loves everyone and loves life. Because life has so much to give, and Jupiter wants to give it back. I have Jupiter in Leo, so there may be that's another one. That is a Jupiter, like Venus, is a very spiritual planet. Jupiter's that idea, gives authority over temples. It's that Gnostic knowledge. It's the message from source. It's the ones that have that knowledge, that lore, that there's just that inner knowing that has that divine guidance. Jupiter is good spirit, is the good daimon, whereas Saturn would be considered the bad daimon. Jupiter wants is the good shoulder or the good angel on your shoulder, your guardian angel, trying to tell you what to how to make the best of this life, and this is a good pocket. Especially for if you have those trine configurations. One, I think that's something to pay attention to. The more active points are those square points. The excuse me, if you have planets in Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, or Taurus, this may be more, this may be a more active time for you in terms of Jupiter tearing things. But when we're talking about Jupiter delivering some ease in that, if you have like Sagittarius and Aries placements, especially Sagittarius. This, because Jupiter's on the overcoming side of that, is on the superior trine of that. That's a good pocket. That's some good support for you. Aries, it's also some good, for Aries placements, and it's kind of a mixed bag considering that you got Saturn there too for Aries placements. But that's going to even depend if you have a day versus a night chart. So that's even a whole thing. But now Jupiter's not under this, just a couple kind of closing things with Big Papa. The only time that Jupiter is really going to be under any sort of hard aspects or hard configurations is when Mars is in the fixed signs. So we get those periods of breaks. Mars won't be, let me see when Mars will be in Leo. Mars won't be in Leo until September. So we get a little bit of that in September. It's from September 27th through November. So yeah, Mars spends almost about 2 months in a sign, give or take. Maybe a little under 2 months in a sign. So there'd be that 2 month chunk that may be a little bit challenging. There, but overall it's going to be a lot better than what it has been. Now that it's not going to be where there's just like this under the cardinal placement. It's just like Jupiter's just getting hammered all the time. So I like this for Jupiter. I like this for the Jupiterian qualification of a chart. I'm gonna switch over. I like this for the Jupiter, and again, I like this for the Leo portions of your chart, depending on how this may be coming for you. So pay attention to that. See how Big Papa is coming into what goodness Jupiter is bringing into your chart. But yeah, this is a time I think to where hopefully where I think things will change. And again, it's not to say that there aren't going to be stuff along the way. There was a lot of confusion and other things in this. I think June is a pretty complex month in terms of aspect. It's not like a super aspect heavy one, but it's just like I'll be curious to see how things come up, how things entail over this period of time here, and hopefully you like that the flow of this. I think I like that. I think I'm gonna keep doing it like that. I think I enjoyed that, but yeah, that's the month of June for us. So yeah, quite an interesting ride there. But I do like that Jupiter there this next year. I have some hopes for that. Again, like it's just there. Of course, again, there are always going to be those little pockets, but even it will be a little while. It'll be like probably when Mars is in Aquarius. That's when and Mars is going to go retrograde here soon. So that's going to be a little while. We have a little while for that. So that'll be where I think the kind of the harder things will happen when Mars is in Aquarius and Mars is in Taurus. That we'll see Big Papa under more pressure than normal, but yeah, and I think that's something too. I think we can hopefully can give us something to kind of look forward to in that. But again, just some things to just kind of general themes to just kind of navigate this, and again apply this to your own chart. Just because I'm just talking about this in a very broad sense of the things and how the celestial bodies relate to one another. You have to see, like I said, what planets is Mars configuring your mutable placements, and by hard aspect, like how it's co-present with my moon. I don't like that. I got a day chart, so I don't particularly care for that. So that's tune in for that. But there are other things too. Gemini is like a mixed bag, because then it's like there's harmonious stuff with all my Leo placements. So it's like that's going to be interesting. I got to make sure to take care of the body. But yeah, to see where that applies for you, see how that maybe apply to your maybe your friends, maybe in your workspace, maybe in your home, maybe in your marriage, whatever that happens, inheritances, whatever that happens to look like. So, but yeah, I would love to hear how how you've navigated the last month, how things are, what you're maybe looking forward to for this month. If maybe this is going to be some ease for you, you've been waiting for these transits to come through there. And again, if you need help in kind of like getting any guidance through these stuff, down in the description box is all my information to get in touch with me for either consultations or for any sort of extra services that I provide. So that's there. I have a couple of playlists for the monthly tabs, and then like I said, with us being in with Mercury having this extended stay in Cancer, I would definitely recommend, I would recommend it all the time, but I definitely would recommend the lunar shenanigans, and that's just to see where the moon's at and how that is and how that's configured with, because I talk about it like just from the astrology of the moon, because the moon applies and separates to everything. So yeah, that just to help us kind of navigate when, especially those maybe kind of harder pockets for Mercury to be in, when those Moon Mercury relationships aren't quite so good ideal, or when they're not there all together. So that's something to tune into. One last thing, I have these videos that talk about the different planets and the domiciles of the other planets in different places. So if that's something that you're interested in, and I'm planning on having more of those out here soon, just been schedule's been a little busy. But yeah, that's available for you as well. But I think that's all I have for you. So good luck out there in June. we got this. We the retrograde. We're gonna get through that just fine. We're gonna start getting into, so yeah, we're some planets. We got Saturn that's gonna station retrograde next month, so that's something we gotta look forward to. But until then, let's enjoy some of this other stuff that's happening here. But till next time, stay mindful out there. You keep raising that vibration through the roof, and I will catch you on the next one. Later.